A strong lead could be the difference between a really boring track and a really interesting track, so you'll want to make sure that you get that part right. Today we're going to be taking a really boring lead and doing a few things to it to make it really stand out in the track. Before we get started with the video, my name is John with Sandscape Audio. We're a music production resource community and we post content like this all the time, so make sure you're subscribed here. Alright, let's jump into Logic and check out this lead that we're working on. Alright, so I just laid down some chords and bass just to have something to work from, and then I made a super generic lead, and we're going to see what we can do to it to make it a lot better. So this is what it sounds like before we add anything. Terribly boring. Not a lot going on. Pretty much just eighth notes all the way through. Dun, 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 dun. Super boring. So we're going to do some things to it. The first thing we can do to make it a little bit better is change up the rhythm. All right, so now it's kind of got like a little bit of a swing feel to it, which is pretty cool. So it's not just the eighth notes all the way through. And then we added a couple extra little notes in here, like this one. And it kind of just drives it a little bit quicker and makes it a little bit more interesting to listen to. When you're trying to figure out a rhythm for your own track, I suggest messing around with a lot of different options. It's very unlikely that you're going to land on the perfect rhythm or something that you really like the first time. So keep messing around with it, keep moving notes around, especially if you're in MIDI. Move them around, see what you come up with, see what clicks for you. After a little bit, most likely you'll find something that's pretty interesting. All right, so next you'll notice all these notes are the same exact length. There's no differentiation in between the note length, and that's also something that could keep it very stale and boring. So we're going to change that up a little bit. All right, so I went ahead and adjusted some of the lengths here. As you can see, they're all longer than they originally were, but they're not consistent. So we have a couple long ones, a couple short ones. So let's compare the difference real quick. Let's listen to the first one without the length changes. Now with the length changes. Already making a big difference so far. Definitely sounding a little bit better. Next is one of my favorite things to do, which is adding pitch bends to leads. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. Sometimes I'll do it in the synthesizer. If I'm using Serum, it's pretty easy to do in there. But today we're using the pitch bend feature in Logic, and we're just going to automate it to make the notes bend when we want them to. So I bring up my automation here, switch this from volume to pitch, and you can see the pitch bends that I already have in here. So let's listen to what it sounds like. So pretty subtle, but it really adds some texture to the sound, which is kind of cool. This is another thing that you're going to have to play around with a little to make sure it doesn't sound too cheesy or overproduced. But once you get it in a good spot, it could sound pretty good in the track. All right, so next we're going to take a look at EQ, and this is all just preference. This sound that I'm using today is actually from our Firestone production suite. And as you can tell, I haven't adjusted the actual sound at all yet. So for this entire lead, we are going to keep this synth. We're not going to change it and just make a different sounding synth to try to make the lead better. We are going to stick with this synth and do the things that are making it slightly different to make it more interesting. But for this track, what I'm going for, it does have a little bit too much high end, so I do want to EQ some of that out. So definitely not a huge difference, but something just a little bit subtle to make it sit a little bit better in the mix. All right, so one of the more obvious things you could do to a lead to make it more interesting is add reverb and delay. So for the reverb on this particular preset, we actually have a macro knob here that just adjusts the reverb in a way that's not too much, not too little, just the right amount. So we have that turned up a little bit more than halfway, and it sounds like this. And that's really the only thing we're going to end up changing in the actual synth preset itself. Next, we're going to add some delay, just a very little bit, gives it some texture. So not too overwhelming, but you can definitely hear the difference. All right, so this track is 96 BPM, and it sounds like it might be heading towards like a 4 on the floor, maybe a tropical style beat. So because I had that idea kind of in my head, I wanted to throw some sidechain on there. So I did some kickstart, and that's just a really light quarter note pumping sidechain effect here. We could turn it up real drastic so you can kind of hear it. But I like where it's sitting right around here because it's not too much. You can't really, it doesn't really jump out at you, but you can tell that it's there. All right, so next we're going to add some accents. So I did say we're not going to change the original synth sound, but we're going to add in a couple of accent notes with a layered synth sound, and that's going to add some texture to a few of the notes that we pick out. So here's my accent MIDI track, and as you can see, it's not all of the notes that are in the full lead, so it's just a few of them. Let's see what this sounds like by itself here. So much more airy, kind of hidden in the background a little bit. And we could throw the main lead over it and see what it sounds like. So again, kind of subtle, but kind of works. All right, the final thing I want to do to this lead is add another synth sound layer that has a little bit more of a transient pluck sound to it. But when I add this layer, I want to make it kind of quiet just so you get that transient that kind of adds over our original synth, but doesn't really overpower it too much. So this is the sound I'm working with now. This is also available in our Firestone production suite. I'm going to turn it up. I have it down really low right now. When I'm turning it up, just so you can hear what it sounds like a little bit better. So definitely kind of like a short, whiny pluck, not a whole lot of reverb or delay or anything like that. A short release, a quick attack. And like I said, we have that down really low here. And we're going to play that with the accents and the main and see what it sounds like. So even with that layer this low, it's still making a big difference. And with everything else added back into the track, it's really going to make the lead cut through. All right, so let's do one final comparison from our original lead and see what we ended up with. So there you have it, just a few ways to make a lead a lot more interesting in a track. So try them all, try a few, try whatever you like, see what you come up with, and keep going until something sounds right. Just remember that in a lot of cases, the lead is the driving element of a track, so you really want to make it pop and stand out for your listeners. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe here. We post content like this all the time. And if you enjoyed any of these sounds that we used today, head over to sandscapeaudio.com and check out our Firestone production suite that we just released. It's got 1,500 files, so you might find something that you like. All right, y'all, that's it for this one. I'll catch you in the next one.